everyone to the September board meeting of Ignite CDA. If everyone would please rise and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Mr. Boyd, do you have any public comment? Any public comment? Anybody else? I'll entertain a motion then to approve the consent calendar for this month.
So moved?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Hi, Brennan.
Hello.
Mr. Jordan, parking update from the Parking Commission.
Just got a couple of things to go over quickly with you. In the end of our fiscal year will be the end of this month, so I'll have a bigger report for you in October. Let's see, on the Rotary Park on Sherman, they're making their rounds through the committees now. They came to parking, did a presentation, and I think that'll go fine. And we've had some vandalism in the Coeur d'Alene garage. And there's, maybe in the wintertime we'll be closing off the top floor of it because we don't need it. We've had some skateboarders and hot rodders up there, and there's been some damage for several $1,000s. So I know when McEwen first opened, we had some issues over there and had to work through. It's unfortunate that happens, but when there's an opportunity, there's always an element that seems to find that opportunity. Now, let's see here on passes. 250 passes right now in McEwen in the Coeur d'Alene garage. Where was it here? Just a second. Oh, here we are. 315 permits in the Coeur d'Alene garage.
Nice.
And we're at 29 of those secured, 27 of those secured parking passes right now. That concludes my brief update on parking.
Thanks, Commissioner Jordan. Executive Director's Report.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to invite Mr. Boyd up to kind of give a project update on the Atlas project, as well as a couple agenda item action items.
Welcome, Mr. Boyd.
Chairman Hoskins and board members. Jeff, can I have my presentation? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So let's see, I'm going to cover these four topics: the RFP number 4 schedule, the Atlas Waterfront Park financial summary, because that project is closing out as far as the agency is concerned, and then the 2 action items: Mountain Heat material processing. Well, I'll get to that in detail, and then the development management contract amendment. So, RFP number 4, refreshing everybody's memory, the RFP 1, 2, and 3 have gone out. This was the last one that you guys selected, Toll Brothers, and we've already started moving forward with them. RFP number 4, which is the next one to propose to go out, will be areas 5 and 13 down here. And October 20th, Tony, is?
Yes, the game plan is to bring an RFP for Area 5A and Area 13 to the board at the October 20th board meeting.
One of the things that's a little bit unique about this, as we've been working through with the team, Heartland, myself, Tony, Danielle, Hillary Anderson, looking at putting this RFP at, these 2 parcels are pretty complex from what the opportunities that exist there. There's lots of information and data that we've developed. When DeChase was originally looking at this parcel, the board remembers you guys split this into 2 pieces. Butler has this piece now, that was in the last RFP, as well as Area 8. So these two pieces have some important potential relationships associated with what type of development, parking, potentially shared parking. So one of the ideas floated by Tony today, and he wants to go forward with it, is we're going to put some exhibits together that capture all this information we've gained up to this point, doing the RFP on the original RFP on 13, and just as the process has moved along and the market has changed. Because there's all this technical data that would be valuable to a developer, but for him to come up with it during the RFP phase, they'd really have to dive into it. So what we want to do is serve it up to them in a very simple way, not architectural stuff, but just technical details. So when they look at it, it's like, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here, which of course what we're after is driving revenue to the agency's bottom line in the public. So that's the schedule. So as we were talking about it today, Tony wanted to push forward and get that out in October. So we're gearing up to put all that stuff together. So I wanted to toss that out Tony wanted me to toss it out to the board and just to see if you guys had any thoughts or comments before we start working on it between now and the next meeting.
Sounds great.
I think that's a good idea.
We have a question, though, from Mr. Mayor.
Phil, the red squares on there?
Those are the represent commercial retail.
Okay.
And that's the other part of it. The PUD is pretty complex in here because there's required commercial components with both 5A and 13. But there's give and take. You know, the parking reduction goes down if you put in a commercial component that's food and beverage. The PUD allows you to use on-street parking to achieve your parking count. So there's all these complexities on it, and like I mentioned earlier, we want to serve those up in a very simple way to understand so the developer doesn't necessarily have to dive into the development standards, architectural standards, the PUD. We will encourage them to do it, but experience to date has shown it works better when we serve it up to them. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Bill, is that the red, is that just a commercial or a representation of the commercial property, or is that the actual building envelope?
It's a representation of the commercial component. Yeah. As you guys can tell, this is like an exhibit I've built on, and I keep adding more information to it. Those pieces I had used in PUD Amendment Number 2 to the Planning Commission, because when they see red, it converts to commercial to them, right? Because that's the color code in the planning world. And so I just brought it forward because it reminds all of us where the commercial component's at. You can see there's a piece here, there's a little piece in that corner, which Toll Brothers will be providing as part of their development.
Thank you.
Yes, one quick question. So I think that's a good idea, what you're doing. I assume you'd probably have contact people at the city, whether it be Hillary or whoever they could talk with, they could tell them all about the benefits and what the options with the property and so forth. They could.
We've developed
them a
most
lot.
of them. So, but
Sometimes they want a person to talk to.
yeah, and the way that's been working now, and you'll hear about this when we get to the Amendment 9B, the development management part of it, those calls all kind of come into me, or they come into Heartland. If it's during the sale process, it goes to Heartland. And then once the sale process has concluded, the RFP process has concluded, you guys selected Toll Brothers, then the contact point rolls over to me, and I kind of manage the affairs from that point forward. And then we draw on Hillary or other folks in the city if we need to.
Yeah, okay.
Just a quick question. Number 5, that retail was 5,000 square feet. Was that the design standard, I think? Or has that changed?
In Area 13,
Or 5?
in Area 5,
Yeah,
it is 1,500 square feet.
1,500 square feet.
1,500 square feet in that one. It is 5,000 square feet in Area 13.
Got it. Okay, okay. Thank you.
Phil, a while back, we were talking about possibly expanding the eastern edge of Block 13. Did that ever occur, or was that just kind of in conceptual stage?
It hasn't occurred from a technical standpoint, meaning we physically haven't done it with the plat.
Right.
What we'll do as part of this serving up of information in this RFP is we'll show it as an opportunity. If a developer so chooses to do that, it has an expense associated with it because there's a stormwater line that runs right along that edge. And depending on what they want to do there. If it's just going to be green space or a buffer or a driveway, we could leave the stormwater line there. If they want to put a building foundation there, that's a bigger deal. Sure. Because they'd have to move the stormwater line. And we had worked through that with Bill Greenwood too about the green space, and we're not talking, I think we were thinking 10 or 15 feet. But just that little bit was very important to the prior entity that was pursuing that project.
Thanks.
So the Atlas Water Park financial summary, I probably should have some sort of balloons and confetti and various other things here, because I certainly know I bear the scars and the loss of hair. So I'm just going to give you a quick summary of this. There should be, there's lots of details I could provide in pictures, but since you guys are closing out the Lake District, you're transferring the balance of the funds to the city to complete the project. Tony thought it'd be a nice time to put the summary together in front of you now. So the project budget that you all had authorized was $6,355,000. And if you remember, we designed to a specific budget. We estimated the project early on. You guys said, yes, we're willing to do a $6 million project. So we designed to a $6 million project. We ultimately, negotiated a contract with La Riviere for $5.874 million, but that had no contingency in it. So we came to the board and asked for some more contingency, because as we move into construction, we knew something would happen. So the total funding the board authorized in October 2019 was $6,355,000. Where it was spent was $5.874 million in La Riviere's original contract, $207,000 in change orders and quantity increases, which is 3.5%. And on a project like this, that's incredibly low. And La Riviere deserves a lot of credit for that. And I'll say Welchcomber deserves a lot of credit for it as well, because there was lots of give and take, redesign. La Riviere said, gosh, if we could do it like this, we would go back and redesign components of it, get it approved through the city. Bill Greenwood deserves a lot of credit for it as well. So that's a really positive story. The playground equipment, that was originally budgeted at $200,000. When we were at that point in the project, it looked like we were getting close to the max budget, and Bill Greenwood said, you know what, I'll have my crews go put it in, because he has certified playground installers. That saved about $60,000 on that line item right there by Bill's crews installing it. It took a while, because he could only do it as his guys had time. He had them on overtime on occasion, so that was a positive story. The last two items here, they're typically not applied to construction, but Tony, in his financial sensitivities, says that you have to take them out of your contingency because they're part of construction. But professional services and whatnot, normally they don't happen. But Tony said, nah, just keep them in there. Put them in there and work against the original budget, which we did. And so those two are additional construction phase services, and the on-site security came out of the construction budget, which is not typical. But we still ended up being under budget by $57,000 on $6.3 million of funding. So a really positive story, and I know that's not a story you guys always hear that your project's coming under budget, but we're pretty proud of it, and I know La Riviere is as well. So that's the summary.
Good news.
So the next one is the first action item. I'm showing you this to get your bearings on the phasing. So phase one, and this is construction phasing, not to be confused with land sale RFPs. So phase one, mostly constructed. The park phase, 0, constructed. Phase 2A and phase 2B. We originally separated those, or created those separate ones, because we started design on 2, but then the triangle parcel came into play. And so we're like, well, we're looking over the fence, speculating what's going to happen there. Will the city actually get the triangle parcel? Will the city transfer the triangle parcel to Ignite? How do we approach this? And so one option was stop and wait to see what happens, or the other option was to break it into 2 phases. So as we worked it through with Tony, he says, well, let's keep rolling and let's break it into 2 phases. So we have been designing this part here. Then the triangle part comes into play kind of quicker than we had expected. The city briskly moved through their decision-making process, and all of a sudden 2B is in play. So we've been designing that as well at the same time, and we're now getting ready to put out Phase 2A. We made a presentation to the Finance Committee, and Commissioner Armand says, why do we have 2A and 2B? Why isn't it just one big project? Which is a good point. At this point, they're now essentially parallel, and with a little bit of effort of combining the documents, the document sets, we could put them out as one big contract. But I couldn't accomplish that in the 7 days between the Finance Committee meeting and this meeting. So you will see that come forward either at the next meeting or perhaps a special call meeting. But in advance of that, one of the things we know we need to do is deal with Mount Hink. And you guys have heard me talk about this. You've authorized a contract before to deal with it. I've never pulled the trigger on it with La Riviere. Tony and I should say haven't pulled the trigger on it because there was all these too many moving parts, and I didn't want to misstep with your funding. And we've been looking at different options. The option that we have concluded makes the most sense at this current stage is to go in and organize this site to receive the unsuitable material that needs to come out of the old pit that's in that area right there. And to orient you guys back into plan view, pit 1 sits right under there, and Mount Hink is over here. So this pit needs to be excavated and that soil put somewhere. I don't want to just pick it up and throw it over here and then have to pick it up again in the future. I want to get organized, and so we're doing things in a thoughtful way. Because the second part of this plan is to do what we did in the Phase 0, start processing some of this material as it comes out of the ground if possible, create topsoil, create structural soils. And then the board can decide, do we just want to sell the topsoil or give the topsoil away? Because you just want it off your property, because there's the potential to, worst case scenario, you just make it look nicer. Best case scenario, you keep selling and selling and selling, and eventually you get through all of it and you develop this area. So that is the idea of budgeting $200,000. The way that the contract would be structured is like we structure most all of civil type contracts, is through unit prices. You negotiate the rate with or the unit price with the contractor, and then as you execute the work, you keep track of it and you pay him for what he does. I haven't had time to accomplish that either with La Riviere, because this is an outcome of the decision to move forward with just making this one big project going forward. So the idea would be, if the board likes this idea, if you authorize a budget, we'll go that budget or some other budget if you come up with. What we would do is go create the unit price contract, work with Danielle to get it put together, and then Chairman Hoskins or Vice Chair Metz could sign it, and we could get to work on this in advance of the bigger construction contract, because it would be nice to do some of this work while the weather isn't raining on us. So I know that was a long explanation, but it's kind of a complicated story, and I'm glad to answer any questions. And we can go a completely different direction too if the board sees, that this if they have a different idea.
Well, so what are we doing with the spoils from this? We're going to have topsoil and structural soil, and then there's some spoils that are no good for anything, right?
There are, and those may ultimately end up in some sort of green space, like this place right here where there's nothing that will be built there. So you're right, Commissioner Jordan, there's going to be topsoil, reject, structural. And it's the reject that needs to find a home. We hope the reject is small. That quantity is small. And that's why I'm not proposing to the board that we go in and process massive amounts of this. I'm thinking 10,000 yards that we test process. What I'm really after is this equipment time to get into here and start organizing this. And as we're organizing, we get to see what's in that hillside. And when we push into a hillside and you see all this fractured rock and topsoil, whoa, time out. That's one we want to start processing on. When you push into some other hill over here and it just looks nasty, you're going to say, well, let's just leave that alone. We'll get it shaped up reasonable, but we're not going to touch it, keep touching the soil, because the objective is to touch it once and be done with it.
Thanks.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor?
anything interesting found when you're digging through all that, in the whole life of the project, right? Is there anything like a box of something that you opened up? And
Bones.
has there been anything, old cars or?
If it was really interesting, I'm sure I would have never heard about it unless I was standing there. It probably disappeared from the site. The things that we have found are corrugated metal pipe, big, huge building foundations. There was a massive building foundation that was found down here that, never showed up. And those are mostly the things that we've found. Railroad tracks, found a lot of railroad tracks out there.
So nothing overly interesting?
Nothing interesting.
Okay.
Is there a contingency built into that 200 already, or?
There's not, and because it's a unit price contract, and so it's one of those things where if the board authorizes that $200,000, it's not going to go beyond that.
Got it.
Because we're paying as we go, and as we start getting closer, we would say, okay, here's what we've accomplished. I may come back to the board and say, gosh, here's the new aerial photograph, and here's what we were able to accomplish, and we found this really great thing over here, and we would think you guys might want to go do this. So to me, that's the most prudent way to do this. Another way to attack this is to go study the heck out of it. Go drill lots of holes in the ground and spend a bunch of money on geotechnical engineering. And at the end of the day, you end up with a report that then you can make some decisions off of. The other way to approach it is just get out there and start dealing with it. And when you kind of think through the scheduling and the return on investment, that's our recommendation. It's just a more cost-effective way to do it.
So just to clarify, Phil, this is just to sort all of the soils.
It's to essentially sort and maybe sort's it's a little bit of the right word.
Layman term.
Yeah, organize. We want to, literally let me back up one. What would first happen here is we would go in and knock this top off and push it down towards the Prairie Trail in order to create a flat spot. Because we anticipate what you may be in store for is long-term sale or giveaway of the soils there. Because your objective is two-part. I think your objective is two-part. One, make it less unsightly so it doesn't look like this, for that's better for your development. That's the least you want to do. The most you want to do, is create a sellable property. And so we would start by moving things around, and as we expose stuff, we might sort it at that point and may process some of it as well. But we'll end up with a big flat spot in there where we can be able to put materials and be prepared to.
So the
Sell them
initial
over a
would
long
be
period of
10,000 yards. What portion of that, of Mount Hank would that be?
It's that, what you're looking at right there, this here is about 160,000 yards of material.
Okay.
So it's very small. Thank you.
So Phil, one of the main things is to excavate pit 1 so we can create some developable lots.
Yes, and that's the other thing is when we excavate pit 1, we need somewhere for it to go. And I just don't want to continue to contribute to the mess that exists up here now.
Does that 200,000 include the excavation of pit 1?
No. It's going to include, I think, removing this asphalt on the top here, because that's a big, thick asphalt section in there. Some of the other things that I intend to work through is we may take that asphalt and grind it into ballast sections and stockpile and sort that. There's some concrete that's LaRiviere's responsibility. You guys might remember he struggled with some of his concrete, so he would install it. We would reject it. It would get ripped out. Well, it's now up on the site here. It's sitting over here. There's also materials that came off of the Celtics Way project, concrete materials that were put there. There's city materials that have showed up. Some of that stuff is usable. Some of it just needs to get cleaned up and moved out of there. And so this would deal with that. The idea is to just get the site prepped, so when we roll into phase 2, we can pull the trigger and just get going, and we're not waiting on trying to figure out what to do here.
Okay.
How much do you believe you can get done before, say, winter?
Of this project or of the big project?
Well, this project to clean up the excavation of pit one, that type of stuff.
The objective would be to be done with all of this before we get into December.
Okay.
Because the short story is the processing it through a shaker screen, as soon as the material gets wet, it becomes problematic. And Riviera would have to bring in a trommel, which is a deal that spins, which they could do, but the screen gives me more opportunities to create different products. Because you could create, 3-inch minus, 1.5-inch minus, topsoil, reject. So it's a little more flexible for us. That's why I want to start with a screen.
Okay.
So do we need a motion?
Yes, you need a motion if the board is willing to authorize up to $200,000 for this Mount Hink material processing and sorting contract.
I make a motion that we authorize up to $200,000 for the Mount Hink material processing and sorting contract.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Quick question. I'm sorry, we've talked about Mount Hink so many times. Did we decide that we can use the soil is suitable to do anything on Mount Hink once we get that cleaned up, or is that always going to be green space? Wasn't there part of it we could do something with?
There is a part up here and right down here that we can do something with.
Okay,
The pit 2 has to be cleaned out here, which is this is, you guys might remember the picture that I brought. It showed pure sawdust. That's what's sitting right here. The reason I'm not asking about that one right now is we're trying to sell that, La Riviera is trying to sell that to the people that burn it for hog fuel.
oh, yeah.
And so if we can accomplish something like that, that's what we would like to do with that. But we're waiting for that to ripen. But then the rest of it over here, no, there's really not much we can do with that area except make it green space unless we excavate it way, way down. So if you sell soil like mad and we just keep selling and selling and selling, if the Silver Valley stuff was going on, that was going on 10 years ago,
Yeah.
we would be shipping this stuff there like crazy instead of stripping the prairie. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, watch for an opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. And then moving on to the next one. So you guys remember that this is parts of a presentation I showed you almost a year ago that explains how the RFP process goes and where the players sit and what the players do. So we're the players that are down in here, and we assist Ignite with all these processes called collectively development management. The things that we do are all of these different things, and they've evolved and shrunk and grown in the last year. But essentially what we're doing is working at your direction through Tony when we do certain things. So when Tony says, gosh, we should start thinking about putting that RFP out, RFP number 4, and we start talking about collecting data to serve up to the developers, it's that type of work. When documents come in that need to be reviewed, architectural things, those are things that we're coordinating, reaching out to the committees, doing with this, working with the city. Heartland does similar stuff. They work a lot with Danielle, working through the DDA and the A&E documents, talking to all the developers during the sale process, and just providing general advice. So last year, you guys authorized a contract. I should know this off the top of my head. I think it was $145,000. And we took off doing this work. This is the way that shook out, the rate at which you guys were receiving invoices for us. So in this amendment, I went through and just projected kind of forward one more year, estimating what we think the level of effort will be. And I think it's going to drop off in June. Certainly Heartland will if we get through RFP 5. And then our work, I notice, is going up because we're doing more developer buyer management. as they come in. So when Toll Brothers gets selected, they call up and they're like, hey, can we get the CAD drawings? Can you do this? Can we come over and meet? Can we meet again? And so we're doing a lot of that stuff because they want to get going. They're anxious to start making submittals to the city. We've also added Don Beggy in here because he's been doing, when you guys created architectural standards, we need somebody to look at the architecture, and you don't want it to be me. And so that's what Don's been doing, and we anticipate he'll continue doing that through. So I looked backwards, looked forwards, and developed a budget of $175,000. It's billed at hourly rates. As directed, we do it. And then just from a reference point, to date, it's been about 2.3% of the land sale value, which seems like a pretty good deal because there's no real estate commissions involved.
Just for everybody's, what, now Don used to be with,
GGLO, yeah.
just so everybody's aware of that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I should have said that. So that's the other action item that's on your agenda, and glad to answer any questions or talk through that.
Thanks for putting that together.
You're welcome.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed amendment, not to exceed 175,000?
Right.
I'll make a motion that we approve up to $175,000 for the Development Management Contract Amendment 9B.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for me while I'm here? I know there's lots of things going on out there, so if there was any other questions the board might have, glad to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Phil?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for all you've been doing. Next on the list is the election of the officers.
I would like to make a motion that we nominate Chair Hoskins and Vice Chair Metz for another term at this great agency.
Second.
I'll second that.
We just cut right to the chase.
That's right.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
There's no discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
You can't
No,
vote.
You're stuck.
Motion carries.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Now I'll entertain a motion to, oh, wait a second. Time for board commissioner comments. Comments from any commissioner.
I have one. I spoke to Leadership Coeur d'Alene on behalf of Jobs Plus last month, and Tony was right before me, so I got the opportunity to hear Tony speak about Ignite CDA and all the projects and partnerships that have been built through the years. So I think it's a great, Tony did a great job of really exemplifying Ignite CDA and all the partnerships that we have been part of, and so I just wanted to thank Tony for all of his hard work.
You know, he
Good
doesn't
job,
have any
Tony.
notes or anything either. It's all on his, it's it's all in his head. It's awesome.
I think he's done it a few times.
Yeah.
Thanks, Olivia. Any other comments? Now we'll enter executive session with a motion.
I move that we enter executive session under Idaho Code Section 74-206, subsection 1B, to consider the evaluation of the Ignite CDA Executive Director.
Second.
Roll call.
Mandel,
Yes.
Metz,
Yes.
Harmon,
Yes?
Whitmire,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Garcia is not here, Hoskins,
Yes.
Chapkus.
Yes.
We are in executive session, and Jeff, that's a wrap.